There's a really dumb take going around that TCU had something to do with Florida State getting left out of the playoff. I'll explain next here on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is you listen to podcasts in its audio variety. I was at my niece's birthday party on Saturday. My niece Lexi turned 6. Happy birthday to her. And I'm watching Georgia, Alabama on the television. And my friend Keith calls me over. And Keith is a big Texas fan. And Keith asked me, he says, who should I be rooting for in this game? And in my mind, I'm like, well, obviously you should be rooting for Alabama because Texas has the head-to-head win over the Tide. And so if Alabama beats Georgia, really regardless of what happens with Florida State tonight, Texas should be in. And he was actually rooting for Georgia. And he explained to me that he felt like even with Texas having that head-to-head advantage, the committee couldn't resist putting Alabama in the game or in the playoff. And so they would put Alabama in there. And then if you had 3 other undefeated teams, Texas would be the odd team out. And so I heard his point, but even then I was still like, no, I think you should be rooting for Georgia in this game. But I went to bed on Saturday night. You know, obviously I saw everything and how it played out. Florida State with their third-string quarterback, they go on and they win. Their defense has an outstanding effort against Louisville, forces turnovers. They win that football game. They're 13-0 ACC champs. They're in, right? Michigan's in. Washington's in. This leaves Bama, Georgia, Texas. And I thought Texas would get that last spot because they have the head-to-head advantage over Alabama. Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia lost late in the season in the conference title game, and so they're the odd team out. And in my mind, I'm thinking when the playoff committee releases their ranking Sunday, it'll be Michigan, Washington, Texas, Florida State. And so we get home from church on Sunday, and I see that's not what happened. Keith was right. They couldn't resist leaving Alabama out, so they put them in. But Texas also got in. And the team that was left out was an undefeated Florida State team. Undefeated ACC champion Florida State, who went 13-0. Jordan Travis, their quarterback, has a broken leg. He won't be back. Their backup QB is out. And so they're hurt at the quarterback position, right? Now, we saw Ohio State in 2014 win a national title with Cordell Russell, their third-string QB. But the committee apparently couldn't look past that. And so there were all kinds of opinions that were getting thrown out there yesterday because it was a surprising result, even with Alabama and Georgia being there and with this thought of we can't leave the SEC out. It just felt like it made sense. If you're basing it off resume, if you're basing it off who is the most deserving, then Florida State should be in. And one of the many takes that I saw, it was really dumb. And Stephen A. Smith is who I saw throw this out there first. And Stephen A. actually, I think he said this last week on First Take, and he tweeted about it yesterday. And now he's not the only one that's been saying this, but he's the one with the biggest platform. After all this went down Sunday, condolences to Florida State. They were fantastic. But blame no further than TCU. If they hadn't gotten destroyed 65-7 in a national title game last year, things may have been different, but we don't need the potential of another slaughter because Florida State doesn't have a QB, couldn't risk it. So Stephen A. Smith thinks because TCU got boat raced in the national title game by Georgia last year, Florida State's been left out because they want to make sure that Alabama gets in because they know that we'll have a competitive playoff, or they assume we'll have a competitive playoff between, Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. And you leave Florida State out, which is ludicrous that the Noles got left out, and I feel for them. I didn't expect to talk about the playoff today because TCU's 5-7, and they didn't even make a bowl game this year. But let me say this. This is such a dumb take. TCU did not automatically get put in the national title game. They beat Michigan on a neutral field to get there. They beat an undefeated Big Ten champion that beat Ohio State. Ohio State gave Georgia a run for their money in the semifinal game. Yes, TCU deserves all the smoke for what happened in the national title game. They didn't play well. They lost by 58 points. It was horrible. It was embarrassing. It was all those things. They're not the first team to ever get blown out in the playoff, but they're the first team to get blown out that badly. Michigan State got destroyed by Alabama one year, 38-0. Alabama lost to Clemson 44-16. and Trevor Lawrence one season, but you don't hear people saying, oh, well, you can't put Alabama back in the playoff. LSU in 2019, they killed Oklahoma, and then they killed Clemson, right, in back-to-back games to win a national title. This is such a dumb argument. TCU won a semifinal game to make it to the national championship game. They won a game against Michigan that nobody thought they could win. Everybody thought Michigan was just going to run over them. Michigan was 2-score favorites. I think they were 14-point favorites going into that football game. And the narrative was, well, Michigan's big offensive line, they won the Joe Moore Award. They're just going to run over TCU. That defense can't hold up. Defenses in the Big 12 suck. Well, guess what? Michigan didn't really run the ball that well that day. They ran for 4.5 yards a carry. They threw the ball well. J.J. McCarthy in the second half, they started throwing the ball in the safeties and linebackers over the top. But aside from Donovan Edwards' first big run of the game, TCU really shut down Michigan's rushing attack. And there's also this idea that somehow that was a fluky win. Because, yes, J.J. McCarthy threw 2 pick-sixes, one to Bud Clark, one to D. Winters. They turned the ball over at the goal line. They ran that Philly special on 4th and goal. Well, first of all, what does that have to do with TCU? TCU made plays. They went and made plays on those pick-sixes. And, it's not TCU's fault that Michigan had dumb play calls. TCU also turned the ball over 3 times, by the way, in that game. They threw 2 interceptions. Amari DiMercado coughed up the ball on a fumble and gave Michigan the ball in the red zone. And Michigan crawled back in that football game after TCU took an early 15-point lead, and TCU kept coming back and scoring. Amari DiMercado had a huge run, and then they scored and make it a 2-score game. Quentin Johnson caught a ball over the middle and did a little hesitation move and took it to the house to make it a 2-score game. Darius Davis had a great punt return, and they kicked a field goal to make it a 2-score game. TCU kept answering every single time that night. They won that game fair and square. And then, yes, they got beat by Georgia, and it was embarrassing, and they didn't play as well as they should have that night. And so they got just run out of the gym by a very, very good Georgia team. But their effort in that ball game has nothing to do with Florida State getting left out of the playoff. Florida State, by the way, which is a blue blood program, we're not talking about like we're not talking about Boise State back in the day, or Hawaii, or TCU back in the Mountain West days when they went undefeated. This is the team that went undefeated in a Power 5 conference. The whole point of the playoff was it was supposed to eliminate scenarios like this. It was supposed to eliminate situations where teams did every single thing they could to have a chance to play for the national championship game, and they still get left out. Florida State should be in the playoff. There's no doubt. And this idea that TCU getting beat in the national title game has something to do with it is just silly. It's dumb. Like when Clemson destroyed Alabama 44-16 with a true freshman quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, what was the narrative then? Were we supposed to keep Alabama and the SEC out of the playoff from then on because they got destroyed? When Oklahoma got destroyed by LSU in the semifinal game, were we supposed to keep the Big 12 out of the playoff from then on? No, this is just hatred from casual fans and from SEC coattail riders about a team that overachieved and got to a place where nobody thought they could. And then when they got to the mountaintop, they couldn't get it done. And they got beat soundly by a really good Georgia team. But that doesn't change the fact that they beat Michigan in a semifinal ball game. Yeah, Florida State, they had some close calls this year. They also beat LSU earlier this season. Alabama benched Jalen Milroe earlier this year and then went and played South Florida, and they were in a dogfight with the South Florida Bulls. It took a miracle on 4th and 31, and Ron Roberts, for some reason, only rushed 2 defenders for Auburn, and Jalen Milroe found his receiver in the back of the end zone to beat an Auburn team. An Auburn team, by the way, that got punked by Jerry Kill in New Mexico State a few weeks earlier on their home field. Got destroyed by the New Mexico State Aggies on their home field. Alabama looks really good, and they beat Georgia, and that means something, man. Nobody's done that in a long time. They might be the best team in the country right now. But the playoffs should be about who has, the best record, who has the best resume. Florida State has a better resume than Alabama. And this idea that, well, you got to consider who you want to play, who the coaches will want to play, what the Vegas line would be. Florida State can't win without their quarterback. Well, we don't know that. Play the game. Everybody thought TCU wasn't going to beat Michigan. because Michigan had a big physical offensive line. Michigan was undefeated Big Ten champs, and they just destroyed Ohio State. And they beat Purdue soundly in the Big Ten title game. So what's TCU going to do against them? Well, they went and won the football game. The games are not played on paper. They're not played in theory. They're played on the field. TCU has nothing to do with that situation, and they shouldn't. If the committee was thinking about that, that was a really dumb thought. And Florida State fans should be furious today for getting left out, because that's a really good football team that put together an incredible season. They went and played tough teams in non-conference. They ran through the ACC. They rallied together in the championship game and beat Louisville, a top 25 Louisville team, with their third quarterback. Jared Verse and that defense are nasty. Mike Norvell has turned that program around. And it's a ludicrous idea that they would be left out. And it's even more ludicrous that the committee would be sitting around considering, what happened between TCU and Georgia the year before as a reason to leave them out. We've seen blowouts in almost every college football playoff, regardless of the teams. If we get 3 competitive games this year, that would be fantastic. And I think Texas-Washington is going to be fun to watch. I think Michigan-Alabama is going to be fun to watch. But TCU had nothing to do with this decision, or they shouldn't. And this is just such a silly take. And it's very easy to dispute because, again, TCU won the semifinal game. They didn't get an automatic bid into the national title game. This was not the old BCS system. They beat Michigan on neutral field. They were double-digit underdogs, and they won that football game. Stop talking about the Frogs when you talk about this situation because they're not related. When we come back, TCU corner is in the portal, and I'll look at some of your reactions to Cordell Russell hitting the portal. That's all coming up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. LinkedIn jobs. Maybe the committee should post something on LinkedIn to find people who understand football better. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. You can post your job for free there. Hiring people can be a high-stakes adventure for your small business. I mean, you're really putting your business on the line when you do it. You want to have people that you trust that can do the job well. You want to have as many top-tier candidates to interview as possible. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have tools to help you find the right professionals for your team, and they can do it faster, and most importantly, they can do it for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of over 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It's the most recognizable name when it comes to hiring folks. Everybody knows about LinkedIn. It's where they go to find work. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Within one day, over 86% of businesses have qualified candidates that they can start looking through. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. And they've even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. You can post your job for free there. Terms and conditions do apply. Use LinkedIn to find talent for your small business and do it today. Okay, back here on Locked On Horned Frogs. So news on the portal front. And by the way, I'm recording this on Monday morning. The portal is officially open. We've seen some big names hit the portal this morning. Kyle McCord, the quarterback from Ohio State. Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback from Oklahoma. Looks like Jackson Arnold will be taking over there as the Sooners make the transition to the SEC. And Dylan Gabriel potentially looking for a new home. And we've talked about some of the players at TCU that are looking for a new home as well, that are going to be hitting the transfer portal. We saw Jasper Lott go in the portal. Chance Biddle, former 4-star safety who committed to the Frogs and has played sparingly. And then Cordell Russell, the big kind of the crown jewel, at least from a ratings perspective, in the 2023 class, the wide receiver from Mesquite. He also plans on finding a new destination. Another name that dropped over the weekend, Mason White, the corner, who was a JUCO transfer. He came in along with Channing Canada last offseason, both from the JUCO ranks. He announced this on Twitter on Saturday. He said, "I'm super grateful to God for the blessings that have been bestowed upon me. I'm thankful for Coach Buckles for giving me the opportunity to play at Texas Christian University. I will forever cherish the strong bonds formed with my teammates and the valuable connections I've made with the staff. With sincere gratitude, I'd like to announce that I will hit the portal." And Mason has 2 years of eligibility left. And so an opportunity for him to go and play right away again, just one season here at TCU. Mason played some. I guess I can't say that shocks me. I was a little surprised. Josh Newton will be moving on. Avery Helm, you think, would slide into Josh's spot, and then you'll need a corner on the other side. Channing Canadu, who I mentioned earlier, was also a JUCO transfer. And so he'll be around. He'll be someone to watch. But you thought White would be somebody who could, challenge for playing time. Now, maybe this says that they're hopeful about some of the new guys like Vernon Glover, which would be outstanding if someone steps up. And possibly Mason just kind of saw the writing on the wall and thought, well, there's some young guys here that they like, and I feel like they're going to get priority over myself. And so he's going to look for a destination. But good luck to him as he continues to find, what the best situation for himself would be. And so that's another name that's at the portal. I think that's 5 so far. Cordell Russell is the big headliner, and I talked about that on Friday's show, just the news that had come down, and some of you brought in some reaction. And so I'll get to that now. Football Maniac says, I agree. If they're talented, put them out there. The ones that didn't hit the field are usually the ones that could have made a big difference. Yeah, I mean, I was confused as to why Cordell didn't get any playing time. I think there's been some rumors about immaturity. There's been rumors about just not completely grasping or understanding the offense. I felt like giving him some playing time sparingly could be a good motivator for him to lock in and, have a better attitude, maybe moving forward, a better work ethic. But I think at the same time, you obviously want to reward guys who are doing the right things in practice on a week in, week out basis. So I don't know the full story here. I think obviously TCU wants to have the best guys on the field. And it's surprising when you look at the talent that he has, that he didn't hit the field, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work out with him getting opportunities this offseason. CJ says Braylon James is in the portal from Notre Dame. Maybe he wants to come home and play with a teammate. Yeah, Braylon James, he played with Cam Cook down in Round Rock, wide receiver from Notre Dame. He's in the portal, so I would think TCU would have some interest. I don't know how heavily they'll go after him, but he's one of the big names that has hit the portal this offseason. David May said no one is loyal anymore. How bad can it be to redshirt and learn to be a stud? That's a different time, David. I mean, I get what you're saying. These young guys want to play, though, and I agree. Like, I think patience is a virtue, and I understand that guys want to play right away, but I feel like there is value in learning how to practice, learning what it takes to be a Division I college athlete, learning the right way to go about things. And sometimes that's a gift to have the opportunity to do that off the field in a season where you're not being asked to play, where there's not a lot of pressure. You can kind of get the ropes, get a feel for what you need to do, what the expectations are, and then you can be a great player moving forward. But that's not how a lot of these guys think now. They want to play immediately. I feel like part of that too is just with the idea of, recruiting being such a 24/7 business now. There's so much attention on these players. There's so many people in their ear that talk to them about what they deserve and what they should have. There's this idea that the portal is like another indictment on this generation of, well, if you don't get instant gratification, then you just move on. And I agree with that to a certain extent, but I think the bigger reality is, like, these guys want to play, and they're all very focused on their future. They want to, you listen to all these recruits, they say they want to play in the NFL. Now, we know the reality is very few of them will, because it's really hard to get to the next level. But the only way you're going to get to the next level is if you have a chance to show what you can do on the field. And so a lot of these guys, I think they just have so much pressure on them, and they're looking so much towards the future that it's really hard for them to understand what's going on in the present. And I know when I was 18 and 19 years old, that was certainly something I struggled with too, right? I thought I had things figured out. I thought that I could just, do whatever and get the results I wanted. And, there's a maturity that comes with learning and growing. And I don't know what the situation is here with Cordell, but I'm sure that he's played his whole life, right? There's probably never been a situation from Pop Warner all through high school where he's been on the bench. So I know that's a tough adjustment for guys. And for whatever reason, he feels like the best situation is to move on. Big Easy said, seems like developing players is not a strength of his coaching staff who they actually developed. I think you have to look at what they did last year with some of the guys that were left over. You can say those are Gary Patterson guys, but the bottom line is they unlocked a dimension of Quentin Johnston's game that we didn't really see before. They made him a true number one wide receiver who had over 1,000 yards. They made Max Duggan into a Heisman finalist. They turned Amari DiMercado and Kendre Miller into NFL players. I don't feel like those guys get those opportunities, the way they're being featured and the way they're being used with the previous coaching staff. Now, have we seen their own guys that they've recruited come in and do amazing things? Not necessarily. I thought that transfer class in 2023 was really good. And they kind of plugged holes and grew and developed together. But I feel like it's too early to start judging this coaching staff on the young guys that are here. But I see your point. Yeah, there's some concern about, where they're at and what they've done so far, but it's still early. Matt Clark, he had a long comment here, but he kind of went through a lot of the high-end recruits that TCU has gotten through the years, or guys that were highly recruited, highly sought after, very highly rated, and how a lot of them didn't work out. Talk about Justin Rogers with the knee injury, Austin Myers, who eventually hit the portal and went to Memphis, Zach Evans, who eventually hit the portal and went to Ole Miss, Sam Jackson, who went to Cal. And so he talks about it seems like it never works out. I'd have to look at the percentage of guys that hit and miss at other schools. I think at TCU it's more pronounced because hopefully this changes under Sonny, but typically it's a program that gets a lot of 3-star guys or kind of developmental guys. And so there's a lot more stories about those types of players having success than the 4- and 5-star players they've gotten in the past. But yeah, you're right. They have had a long history of, some of the big names, some of the people that even casual fans know come out of high school, like, oh, that's a really good player. They're excited about him, and that not working out. And so I don't have a great explanation for it. But this is another one in Cordell Russell, who you assume is going to move on and go somewhere else. And like I said, Jordan Hudson did this last year. He didn't exactly light the world on fire at SMU. But I think the question is, if you keep kind of missing on players like this, regardless of what they do at the next stop, what's the evaluation process like? Where's the disconnect? Where are things going wrong? And what's happening that's allowing these things to happen? So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Cordell. I hope he finds a good spot for him where he can get on the field and play. And I think he can still be a really good, productive wide receiver at the college level. But unfortunately, it didn't seem to work out here at TCU. TCU basketball beat Georgetown. Emmanuel Miller hits a crazy shot at the buzzer. That's coming up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. FanDuel, NFL season is in full swing. Got a huge game between the Cowboys and the Eagles coming up on Sunday. FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's a sports book where you can bet on NFL games. And if you put down a $5 money line bet and you win, just one $5 money line bet and you win, you'll get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 in free money that you can play with, $150 in bonus bets from FanDuel. All you got to do is make a $5 money line bet. And of course, you need to hit on that bet and win that bet, and you can get money to play with courtesy of FanDuel. They still have this promotion going on. They're very generous to continue to do that. FanDuel also has an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. They got prop bets. They have money line bets. You can bet against the spread. Whatever you're interested in, whatever the case may be, FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel app. Make it a priority today. FanDuel, official betting partner of the National Football League. Closing up shop here on Locked On Horned Frogs. TCU basketball with a victory over Georgetown, 84-83. Emmanuel Miller caught a baseball pass from Micah Peavy around half court, takes a few steps, launches a three from it was beyond half court, but he was still pretty far behind the three-point line. He was running along the sidelines. He launches a three. The prayer was answered off the bank and in, and the Frogs beat Georgetown 84-83 and get a victory and stay undefeated. Yes, it looks like Emmanuel may have stepped out of bounds on that play, but they reviewed it, and the officials explained to Ed Cooley, the Georgetown coach, and to Jamie Dixon, of course, the TCU coach, that they can't review whether or not a player stepped out of bounds. If it was ruled that he was in bounds on the play, that they can't change that call. So they were just simply reviewing whether or not he got the ball off in time, and he definitely did. He got that off a few seconds before the buzzer sounded. So TCU wins. They had a 14-point lead in this game. They blew that lead, but they came back and they get a victory. Now, if you listen to – I did an interview with Andy Patton. If you want to check that out, I dropped it on Thursday. It's on YouTube. It's also on the podcast feeds. And we talked about TCU basketball. And this was before the Georgetown game. And Georgetown's not having a great season. They lost to Holy Cross earlier this year. Ed Cooley is their new coach. He's in his first year coming over from Providence. And so this is not, a top 25 team that they beat, but it was on the road, and it was a game where they were down by 4 with under a minute left, and they had some huge possessions down the stretch where they executed. Jameer Nelson Jr. hit a big three to cut the lead down to 2. Later on, Jacoby Coles gets a kick out. He catches at the top of the key. He hits a big three. Emmanuel Miller hit that big three at the buzzer. Now, speaking of officials, Emmanuel Miller tried to go in and hit a layup late in that ball game to take the lead, and he gets called for a foul, or he doesn't. There's no foul called. Even it looked like he just got raked across the arm as he was trying to go up. And then there was a foul call on the other end when Georgetown similarly was trying to take the ball to the rack. So officiating was kind of rough on both sides, but yeah, it was a missed call. Bottom line is TCU escapes with a victory on the road. Georgetown's not the most impressive team in the world, but it's still a win. It's still a game where they had to execute in crunch time. First game this year where it was close late because they've been playing so many teams that they're just significantly better than. And they rose to the challenge, and they got it done. They play Clemson next Saturday. That's going to be a much bigger test. Clemson looks like a top 25 team. They beat Alabama earlier this year. Emmanuel Miller had 29 points on the day against Georgetown, 12 of 18 from the field. Jacoby Coles, again, was fantastic, 17 points, 8 of 12 from the field. Jameer Nelson Jr., not a great shooting night, but he did hit that big three late in the game and had 9 points. My biggest concern for this group right now, Avery Anderson was good off the bench on Saturday. At the guard position, they look deep. The big men are struggling. Ernest Uday still can't stay on the floor. He continues to get in foul trouble. He has just not been able to get out there and play much. And Xavier Cork has struggled as well. So the front court's going to have to get better. They're going to have to find a way to stay out of foul trouble, to play together, to play at a high level. And the competition's obviously going to go up here in the next few weeks, but a nice win for TCU men's basketball. Way to fight, way to battle, and get a victory on the road when they didn't play their best game. TCU men also won their last game, and so they remain undefeated. Madison Connor had 41 points against Tulsa, and they continue to roll. They're 8-0. So both basketball teams are undefeated. Both are playing really well. Mark Campbell and Jamie Dixon doing an outstanding job so far this year. We'll be back tomorrow. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.